good evening to all of you, and we are meeting back again in our forum discussion on behalf of APIT, on behalf of all our students, and we warmly welcome all of you, of course, including all our students and our special guest for the day, right? Let me just remind you that just like we have been doing in the past, you will have the opportunity to get to know this information. Definitely ask about the concerns that you have in terms of your modules and related concerns relating to your program, because we have a special guest who would always be willing to support you and who would always be willing to let you know the information and anything that you want to clarify relating to the area of concerns and area of job roles that he's playing, in addition to that as a beautiful human being. So we do have Mr. Dilshan Rodrigo, and before we move on to his discussion, let me hand over to Dr. Rohantha to talk a little bit more about him and to see where we connect in today's session. Doctor, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kaushali, and it's a privilege to talk to Dilshan, one of my very close friends for a long time. Done fantastically proud. So Dilshan is a Chief Operating Officer of HNB, a proven leader having many years of senior positions in multiple industries ranging from banking, insurance, investment banking, and apparel. Currently serving as the Executive Director, Chief Operating Officer at HNB PLC, and holding board positions at HNB Assurance, Guardian Equity, Management, Sigma Development Limited, and Credit Information Bureau. A proven track record of delivering results during challenging leadership roles, driving sustainable business and transformational change. He has played a catalyst role in the bank's transformation and cultural change by being the driving force in centralization, automation, outsourcing, and process improvement initiatives. Also recognizing for driving performance, culture through training and talent acquisition, and introducing several breakthrough cost optimization initiatives. He currently serves on the councils of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, Asian Bankers Association Taiwan, the latter as Chairman Policy Advocacy Committee. He has served on several local councils of SIMA, ACCA, and risk professional forums, the latter two as President for the 2-year terms. He has taught on various undergraduate and postgraduate programs of SIMA, ACCA, PIM MBA over a decade, and currently serves as a guest lecturer on SLID Direct Certification programs while serving on its council. Dilshan is a fellow of SIMA and ACCA UK accounting bodies and holds an MBA from Cranfield University, UK. A keen fitness enthusiast, he enjoys regular cycling, badminton, water skiing when time permits. Dilshan is a fantastic human being, but what really attracts me to Dilshan is his love for teaching. I yet remember, if I'm not mistaken, he won a world prize. I don't know why that is not there in this on this resume of his. And even after he won that world prize, I think it was for SIMA, I remember him coming and teaching. And that's how we met way back. And his love for teaching continues, and that's actually what really binds us together. So Dilshan, it's beautiful introducing you, and it's actually an honor to have you on this program. So Dilshan, over to you.
Thank you, Rohan. Rohan, I didn't expect you to go through the entire profile. I must memory note for myself to make my profile a little shorter, much shorter next time around. So, as Rohantha mentioned, both of us share a common passion, which is teaching. And both of us used to teach on several MBA programs. Unfortunately, I had to stop because of work demands about 5 years back. But whenever time permits, I do like to teach on, MBA programs. Previously, I used to teach on SEMA, ACCA, undergraduate programs. And that's really something that I really used to enjoy at least once a week, 3 hours. engaging with students and learning from them as much as I used to share my learnings with them. So on Rohan's invitation, my presentation today, can you all see the screen on the
Yes,
great.
that's fine, Mr. Dilshan. Yes.
So I would like to share my story on COVID recovery. I'll try to stick to the 25-30 minutes. So basically, it's been a amazing last 12 months. I mean, to say the very least. I have been driving this COVID recovery project at the bank. So as usual, every new year, you go and address the staff. We select a few branches and we talk about the year gone by. And I never had a situation where the contrast between what we expected for 2020. If you remember at that time, all we knew was that there was this little known virus in Wuhan, China, in January the 1st in 2020, and never anticipated all that was to take place in our country and the world in the last year or so. So for us as at HNB, like many other businesses, 2020 was to be a landmark year. We had set some really challenging goals about 5 to 7 years back, 2013, 2015, where we want to be as an institution, as a bank in 2020. One thing that held us in good stead was the fact that we took digital transformation very seriously. So we realized almost 7 years ago in 2013, I remember we had a strategy session that was facilitated by Hilmi Kader. Some of you may know him. And at that time, our entire business model was about preparing ourselves to what was to unfold in 2020, by 2020. So we took a decision to revisit our business model. As a bank, typically you are familiar with a model where you have a number of branches. HNB is of course a household bank in Sri Lanka. We have 250 branches spread across the country, from the north to the south to the east to the west, and each branch was basically a bank of its own. We used to call them mini profit centers. So each branch manager and the regional manager for that respective 10 regions that we had, we used to say, you are the CEO of your branch, you are the CEO of your territory, CEO of the town, or CEO of the region. So what that meant was that they took responsibility for both marketing as well as the back office operations. So the change that we made in terms of digital transformation was to move to what we call the hub and spoke model. The hub being the center and the spoke being all the branches. So we made the branches showrooms where we would be selling both our digital products as well as our conventional products, a sales booth to our customers, and fundamentally took a lot of operations that were previously done at the branches to the center, and created centers of excellence for operations, credit, disbursements, storing of security documents, setting up our own contact center where customers can get in touch with our agents 24/7, setting up a collection center to follow up on recoveries. So all these functions that were previously done at branches were systematically brought to the center over a period of time. And that was really the whole business that we did in the last 5 years. And we also invested in what we call the paperless office. So all our credit approvals, all our memo approvals happened on our iPads or on our computers or our laptops or PCs. We automated a lot of different functions, and we invested significantly on digital products. We invested something like 2 billion every year on internet banking, mobile banking, wallets, the cloud infrastructure, server consolidation, all these to be able to prepare ourselves for digital. And another area was that we outsourced a lot of our non-critical operations to outsourced service providers. So that was really this whole journey that we did on digital banking, which really held us in good stead when COVID-19 hit us, because we were prepared to be able to provide the type of customer service that was required without hindering our branch operations, which were mainly impacted by the curfews and the isolated areas and the work stoppages that happened intermittently during the whole year, last year, during the course of many months during the year, because we were still able to provide that customer convenience to be able to do their banking unhindered through the 600 cash deposit machines, the ATMs, then the internet banking, mobile banking, wallets, internet payment gateways on your websites to be able to do their banking. So that was really what digital banking preparation was. But having said that, with all that preparation, we were still surprised when we found that for most customers, our existing infrastructure was not accessible to them. So there was a joke going around at that time as to who made the biggest difference to digital transformation. Was it the CEO? Was it the CIO? Or was it COVID-19? And the answer was COVID-19. So that really caught a lot of other institutions really off guard in the financial services sector, and that resulted in a lot of the banks as well as financial leasing and finance companies, quite a few of them really struggling to really get their act together in a situation like that. The second was the stressed assets management. So that huge numbers of businesses were impacted, and as far as a bank is concerned, we do a very simple business model, which is basically to accept deposits and then lend that money to businesses or individuals. So in between, like a grocery store will buy stocks and sell the stocks. For us, it's about buying money and selling money and making a margin in between. So when we found that the government had to give moratoriums to the tourism sector, we had multiple rounds of moratoriums, starting from what happened with the constitutional crisis in 2019. Thereafter, we had the April incident with Zaharan. That was followed by knock-on impacts with COVID. So over a period of the last 2 years, there are institutions that have been on moratorium, which means that they don't pay interest or capital or a combination of the two for almost 2 years, right? So when you look at it from a bank's point of view, it amounts to something like, almost at one point, almost 20% of our loan book under moratoriums. And that's, 80 billion rupees for us. And so that was a very, very significant impact to the bank's cash flows. And that is still there. And then also, we need to also support businesses in terms of working capital loans to get up to speed. So business revival was a key area for us to focus on. And during this time, the entire banking sector from 2018 to 2020, you saw the industry NPLs, non-performing loans, doubling. And for the financial services sector also, it doubled, and in some cases, some of the institutions actually, are facing difficulties to remain solvent. So that was the challenge in terms of stressed assets management. Many businesses are struggling today, and at the same time, we need to provide the oxygen, provide the support to help them in their business recovery efforts. Then safety and stability. How do you ensure safety of our staff? We take for granted many things when it comes to the staff safety, but today that has changed. There are a number of factors we need to take into account. Ultimately, driving the right kind of culture where staff are comfortable to come to work, and at the same time, we provide the infrastructure for them to be able to work safely with the right kind of hygienic equipment, masks, sanitizers, shields for the frontline staff, as well as the social distancing, social exclusion protocols. All that infrastructure needs to be set up, and also stability for the customer. So until now, customers really didn't see the difference between the price or the rate on a deposit and the safety of the institution. So what we found was that the stability of the institution mattered a hell of a lot for customers when it comes to trusting their hard-earned deposits with an institution. So as a bank, actually, we benefited. We grew our current accounts and savings accounts and our deposits far more than we envisaged, because a lot of people placed their trust with us and brought their monies from elsewhere to us. So that was something that we took for granted, but we benefited significantly in terms of monies flowing to us because of that. And the last area was adapting staff to working from home. This is, unlike many other industries, some of us work continuously, right? So I am one who continuously came to work throughout the last year, except for maybe a few days when there was curfew and we were not expected to come to work. Otherwise, the leadership team, really, we made it a point to say that the leadership team must report to work and provide leadership. But having said that, departments, functions, branches were expected to have a roster basis to work. So we had 60-40 or 50-50 working from home and working at office, and also looking at remote sites to work. And then we also developed the capability technologically, which we didn't have before, for 1,400 of our staff, that is almost 1/4 of our staff, to be able to effectively work from home using virtual VDI and VPN facilities, secure facilities, to be able to enable them to work from home, because ultimately, we just cannot afford for people to drop the ball, because there is also vulnerabilities associated when all people are not at work, and the bank has to keep going on. Of course, a bank is a critical service, so at any point in time, we always had at least 400 people working in the bank, just to keep the lights on, making sure the technology works, the infrastructure is in place, operations, services, centralized functions continue to work throughout the year. But we also had the capacity, we have the capacity now for close to 1/3, 1/4 of our staff to effectively work remotely at home or elsewhere. So these were the 4 key areas, I think, in terms of adaptation, things that we didn't anticipate, but we had to very quickly get up to speed and get organized to do. So overall, there were 7 pillars from a planning point of view in terms of how we managed this last year. First was, of course, staff safety. So the government basically mandated what the requirements are for institutions and in banks in terms of how you manage the organization. So very quickly we adapted to making the workplace more safe, ensuring that our staff adhere to all the social protocols, ensuring that uh, we adapt to virtual meetings, virtual discussions, virtual conferences, and at the same time, managing very effectively in a paperless environment where we can get everything done using the laptops and the iPads and the computers that we prepare. Many people actually took their desktops home, laptops home, or to a remote site and got to work. So I'm very happy to say that, at the end of the day, productivity didn't suffer uh, as much, because we had even processors to track the efficiency of our staff working from home. Then, of course, business resumption planning. So one of the key areas there was, of course, the BCP for the systems and the disaster recovery drills that we had to do for the departments, making sure what we had documented actually works in practice. So many departments said they were not geared for prolonged closure. When they saw a disaster, they said they anticipated a disaster to be 1 week, 2 weeks at most. But when you have a 2 months work stoppage, then it becomes very difficult to adjust. But we did adjust. We had to do a lot of things, make sure that the teams were geared, contactable, easily contactable. There were daily huddles, daily planning meetings to get things organized. Then, of course, a very important area was about driving digital, which is really making the customer aware that the fact that staff are not coming to work in the branches or in parts of the head office didn't mean that banking needs to be hindered in any way. So we had a call center that ran 24/7, and that call center works in about 4 different locations. Initially, before COVID, we had one call center in one place, but then very soon we set it up in such a way that there were 80 people in the call center. 20 of them would work from office, 20 of them would work from home, 20 of them would work in a remote site, which we specially designed for the purpose, and another 20 would work from another site at the head office where they could work from. So that was the kind of adjustments we had to make. Then also, as I mentioned earlier, the workplace organization in terms of managing to do everything that we used to do, training, meetings, conferences, engaging with customers, engaging with suppliers, even doing our IT projects as far as possible digitally, and also driving the products. So we suddenly saw the usage of our digital products growing exponentially. So internet payment gateways, people started buying stuff on the web, ordering stuff on the web. A lot of customers who were previously not having an internet banking merchant code started setting it up so that they can start selling on the web. So all that we had to engage with our customers and support them in adapting their businesses to the digital world. Then the secure working from home environment, where I mentioned earlier about making sure not only that we have VPN, VDI facilities for our staff, but also to make sure that they are monitored. So one of the decisions that we took very quickly was to say that we won't buy PCs ever again. We will only buy laptops, because that is really what makes sense for us in terms of easier mobility, as well as a camera being available on the laptop as well, which makes it very much easier for all the engagements that we require, collaborations that are required in an environment like this. Then the liquidity aspect. Initially, when COVID hit us, there was panic even amongst the board, thinking that on one side customers might, because they are not earning money, because businesses are disrupted, because salaries are not getting paid, some people getting salary cuts, as well as people getting unemployed, there would be a huge demand for cash, and that our banks are going to see a lot of withdrawals taking place. And at the same time, businesses would be hard pressed for cash, and they will be drawing on facilities. And as a result of that, banks will be facing a liquidity crunch. But that didn't happen. What we saw was a flight to quality. So we saw a lot of the banks like ourselves benefiting from this situation, because a lot of funds started flowing in from the customers to us, because they wanted a safe and stable place to keep their money in. And on the other hand, even customers didn't draw on loans as much, because they started cutting corners in terms of managing their business. They realized more borrowings means more headaches, more debt. So they started managing their cash flows much more tightly. As a result of that, exactly the opposite of what we anticipated happened. We were flush with cash, and the entire industry was flush with cash. Of course, the government also helped by reducing what is known as a statutory reserve requirement. By doing that, they pumped more cash into the system. So that really was not an issue. Then also, as you know, HNB also is engaged in a microfinance institution, as well as a insurance company. So we used to also look at the health in terms of staff safety, in terms of technology, as well as the liquidity aspects in these three institutions as well. And that was also being managed on a regular basis, following up to ensure there won't be any shocks and they won't be facing any issues. And whatever learnings we had, we shared with them in terms of how to manage and establish a reporting cadence for them to follow through. And finally, and probably the most important, is business revival. How do you manage the businesses? There's so many businesses that are impacted, in trouble. How do you support them? We had so many horror stories. I remember, when the vegetable market in Dambulla was closed, right? There were many farmers who actually destroyed their crops because they had no place to sell, and there was no transport that was possible, because the country's transportation network was completely destroyed. And there were also a lot of exploitation happening, where you would find a trader, a wealthy trader, or a politician coming to them and saying, look, you have this entire stock of pineapples, a truck full of pineapples, I'll pay you 10,000 for it, give me the entire stock. So that kind of thing used to happen. And that's where you realize the importance of supply chain. So as a bank which has over 200,000 customers, from large corporates to SMEs to microfinance, what we did was we tried to create supply chain linkages. We supported them. We supported our large corporates finding parties in our microfinance portfolio who could actually link up with them and support them. Then we found people who used to sell as retailers, companies who could do transportation, so that they can enable a online sales portal. And we also supported them with digital banking products, like the developing a website for them where they can actually start selling their produce, introducing internet payment gateways, giving them the wallets. We have a wallet called Solo. So all these things began to happen, and we systematically developed the software to start tracking and ensure that our staff, our relationship managers, move to a real business advisory role, supporting them, sharing our best practice in terms of visioning, how to change their business model, how to look at new areas to do business. So there were people who were in the tourism sector, started also doing a lot of catering work, or they used to even let out some of their excess space to tuition providers. So there were lots of creative things that used to happen, and we played a role on a best efforts basis to facilitate that. So business revival still remains a key priority, and that's an ongoing effort because ultimately all these businesses, I mean, at the moment we have 12,000 businesses who are unable to pay either interest or capital. And that would be, as I said earlier, close to 20% of our portfolio. And that number, how do we get them to actually be able to service some interest, at least service, get their business going in some way and drive that. So that is happening on a continuous basis. We support them to get their businesses going. So key challenges, we had a policy very early that we need to make sure that our top 100 leadership reported to work daily, so that they can provide leadership to this whole working from home culture. At the same time, prevent abuse, make sure that everybody is actually gainfully employed and we don't drop the ball, because in a bank, our stock is money, right? So you cannot afford to have a situation where there is theft or internal fraud, external fraud, making our bank branches or locations or walls vulnerable to outside influencers. So very important. I think that was an important decision that we took, and we used to monitor that, and that helped in terms of driving the right kind of message throughout the organization. We had a few instances where staff members were detected as COVID-19 positive. I remember the first instance about 4 months ago when we had a member in the head office branch where I sit in being detected as COVID positive, and that was quite early at the time. And panic set in, at least amongst the press. And then I remember when I went home that day, I had so many calls from friends of mine overseas, relatives, asking for my safety, whether I'm okay, whether whether the HNB branch and the head office needs to be closed, which means 1,000 staff members. And then there we had a visit from the PHI. It was like an interrogation. So we went through all that, and excellent learning opportunity. When one staff member was detected, then all the staff members close by had to be quarantined, and some of them used to stay in boarding houses who refused to keep them there. So we had to make arrangements to send them to their hometowns just for quarantining purposes. And then even to find a driver to do that was a challenge. Finding a place for them to stay in the night was a challenge. But we overcame all that, and I'm happy to say that we've had less than 5 people COVID positive, which is much, much less. And we take all the precautions to make sure that they are safe, secure. And every one of them who was detected COVID positive were symptomatic. So none of them got hospitalized. They only had to go to the quarantine facility. We supported them during that time, and they got back to their homes and then back to work safe and sound. Technology became a key imperative, key focus for us. So there are various issues in terms of glitches, improvements, the cyber risk, which is an ever-present danger, whether we become more vulnerable to cyber attacks. So how do we strengthen our firewalls? How do we ensure that we are protecting in the process of people working from home, as well as in remote sites, sending out confidential information about the bank or about our customers outside? How to even ensure that there is no accidental transmission of information? All that was an important focus, and that was a focus that we had right throughout. Managing the productivity loss, again, as I mentioned, the fact that the top team worked and led from the top helped a lot in terms of managing that. So gaining digital market share and leapfrogging competition was a key opportunity for us, and that's something we monitor and we follow up. I think for us, COVID has been a huge enabler in terms of strengthening our digital footprint and making HNB more accessible to a lot of our customers on the digital front, and also changing the mindset of our staff to think digital. And finally, again, tracking the business revival efforts and outcomes. So how many of our customers are reviving on a day-to-day basis? What is the role we are playing? And for us, the test of business revival is really being able to service our facilities and getting off the ground, getting their businesses back off the ground. Sometimes the businesses become very different to what they were doing before, but really that's a creativity, that's a entrepreneurship that is required. And we also went to the extent of actually bringing in industry experts, consultants who could come in and work with these companies, businesses, to help them, transition from that old business, which is very much a brick and mortar business, to a digital business where they bring in new supply chain partners and drive business. So you have seen, I mean, if you look at the stock market today, you see some businesses have really succeeded and some businesses have really struggled. And sometimes in the same industry, you find winners and losers. And so that learning is something that we try very hard and get our relationship managers and branch managers to share with our customers, to encourage them and inspire them to develop, grow, and really contribute to their business, to their staff, and also to the economy. So finally, the key takeaways, very important, tone from the top. So leading has to happen from the top in a crisis like this. We set up WhatsApp groups. We set up a group called Shield HNB, which is a WhatsApp group which has all the people that are important, so that information can go from whatever we've decided right down the line very, very fast. Leadership from the board downwards, making sure that the key priority areas are focused on. Reporting to the board. So I go to the board every month, and I have one area which I have to talk about, which is one of the areas that I have to, which is a permanent item on the agenda in the last year or so, is COVID-19 strategy and risk mitigation plans. So that's the kind of focus that came, and that was very important. Second is, it's about building the right kind of culture and the habits. So for me, one of the key learnings is about improving people's stamina and improving people's way of life to become more healthy. So whether it's exercise, whether it's what you eat, what you drink, steam inhalation, social distancing, social protocols are not enough, but building the stamina and the strength to withstand the virus is an extremely important thing. So you find today, your kids sometimes, spending a hell of a lot of time in front of the computer. Some of them have no option because online studies is now a way of life. But beyond that, some people are distracted. They would be playing computer games, sometimes spending 16 hours in front of the computer, playing games instead of, doing the sport exercises, getting about their usual things. So all they are doing as a result of that is becoming more vulnerable to the disease. So one of the key things that we did was really driving the right culture and habits through, counseling, through webinars, getting doctors, medical professionals, people, talking to them about, making a difference in terms of how they should live their life. So some of the activities we are doing right now is we are offering them herbal beverages instead of tea and coffee at least once a day. We have a project called Walking the Talk, which is to encourage people to cycle to work or walk to work at least once a week on Fridays. So there are times where I would on Fridays, get onto my bike and cycle to work and get back. So it's just a 15 kilometers, just a half an hour to come and go. Very easy, but it makes a big difference when you encourage employees to do that, because then they realize how important that part of it is. Planning horizons changed. I mean, we are used to having meetings once a month, strategies once a year, or once in 3 years. But once this took place, initially we used to plan almost daily, sometimes almost hourly. depending on the the decisions that used to come through from the government, the decisions that we had to take based on health authorities. So planning horizons, we have weekly meetings, daily meetings, and that whole drumbeat is extremely important in making sure that the right focus is there. So in difficult times or in challenging times, you need to plan more often, and that is really the success. And also communicate very strongly down the line very quickly. And formal channels don't work, informal channels are more effective. Surveillance and tracking. So all what we do, all the policies that we put into action, we have separate teams just to track, as well as do the surveillance to see whether it's actually happening and call out people who are not doing it properly. So this is a very important aspect. The next area is, of course, networking. So right from at my level, I would be talking to the head of IDH, the head of the police, head of the army, uh, various people who matter, who are the policymakers in terms of the decisions that are being taken. So networking became an extremely important thing, because you need to be able to anticipate better what is going to happen and then take action. So even a simple thing as what are the branches you are going to keep open, what are the branches you are going to close, who are the staff you are going to engage to come to work and who are not, is a function of your planning ahead after speaking to people, so that you get an idea as to how they are thinking, so that you are able to become more effective in what you're doing. And finally, scenario planning. And scenario planning, I know you would have learned from your books, is not restricted only for financials, but for everything. So think in terms of scenarios. Don't think in terms of fixed events. So when we start preparing our budgets, when we start preparing our forecasts, when we start preparing for events, we think in terms of a most likely, which is the base case, what is the pessimistic scenario, what is the optimistic scenario. Then it makes us think more strategically in terms of what we are planning to do. So even when you look at the economic indicators, we will plan for 3 different scenarios and then develop our strategies. So the entire mindset has changed from a fixed number to thinking in terms of multiple scenarios based on multiple environments, multiple contexts. And that is an important aspect in terms of what we do. So I think that was, I think, some of the key learnings that I wanted to share with you. And I just want to close with this last slide, which is our being recognized as the best managed bank during COVID-19 in Sri Lanka, which was just the latest little bit of publicity just released 2 days back, which we are very, very proud of. So it's not an easy exercise. It's really about focusing on the key things, and I just want to share my experiences in this, and I would very much like to hear whatever questions you may be having. I think I've taken probably just over 30 minutes. I hope I haven't bored you too much in the process.
Thank you, Dilshan. It was a fantastic presentation of leading the bank, which actually has been ranked as the best managed bank during COVID-19. See, I mean, before I open it out to the house, let me ask a few, thoughts from you. See, when this happened on the 20th of March, and you found that the whole world had crashed. You know what I'm saying? I mean, what went through you?
So it was interesting. I still vividly recall this. We had all bought tickets for our big matches during that time. So the Joe Pete was arranged, I think, for the 7th and 8th of March. The Roy Tour was on the 14th and 15th of March. We were completely caught unawares. And then during one of the Saturdays, as soon as we heard that, all hell is breaking loose, we got the top team together, and that was, I think, maybe on the 7th of March, which was a Saturday, and we had about 20 of us with social distancing in place, had a conversation in terms of how we are going to manage this situation. And a lot of what you saw in the presentation was the thinking that happened during that session, where I remember standing in front of the Maggie board and planning the strategy with the team in terms of what we should be doing and what should our key priorities be. And then we created this drumbeat where we had a weekly meeting. We had a steering committee as well as a working committee, and a dissemination of whatever we agreed after being very closely associating with the key decision makers, external as well as internal, in terms of ensuring that we put in the fundamentals, get the technology to support the working from home, ensure that our customer transactions are not impacted just because the branches are closed, ensuring the digital banking is in place, ensuring that the essential equipment and the hygiene factors are in place for our staff so that they can safely come to work, and also appease whatever concerns they may have. So all these building blocks were set up during that meeting, and then from there onwards, we never looked back. We continue to refine whatever we did, and we, week on week, day by day, month on month, continues to refine what we did, so that we learn and we keep putting things in practice.
So Dilshan, now the first quarter we had a 1.6% degrowth. Then second quarter you went into a 16.7% degrowth. So, I mean, it would have had a huge impact with regard to your collections, and with regard to how people would want to kind of develop their business and sourcing of funding. So, how did you reconcile these two?
So that's probably the fundamental, the key issue. So on one side, we had a situation where lots of businesses on the lending side were struggling to be able to service their debt, right? And of course, as a bank, cash flows in terms of interest payments coming through. On the other side, we had a lot of money flowing into the bank in the form of deposits, because people were actually bringing their deposits to the institution that they trusted the most. So as a result of that, what we found was that rather than being short of cash, we were actually flushed with cash. So, which was, in a way, it was a nice problem to have, but a costly problem, because there was a time when we had maybe 10 billion, 20 billion excess cash, which we had nowhere to lend to. So there was a huge opportunity cost in terms of there not being any lending opportunities during that time. So from a solvency point of view, unlike many businesses, as a bank, we were not impacted. But what was really challenging us is, how do you support these businesses who were struggling to be able to keep afloat? How do you support these businesses during that time where they are finding it difficult to pay their overheads, pay their salaries, and because at the end of the day, we have to be responsible. We need to support those businesses who come out of the problem. So that's where the business revival whole initiative had to happen, and it has to be a holistic thing. So we had to play a mentoring role, a counseling role, in addition to, of course, supporting with the moratoriums and the working capital loans. There was a lot more, establishing the supply chain linkages, providing them with digital solutions. So there are many stories, success stories where we saw a lot of businesses really bouncing back. So you might say, look, tourism sector is impacted, but there were so many customers in the tourism sector who were able to adapt their business in a completely different manner, and get back And again, we sometimes played a big role in that, in terms of supporting them with ideas, supporting them with strategy, supporting them with the digital products, as well as the financing in that.
So does it? But don't you think that the real reality will happen only when the moratorium is taken off? I mean, until then, you really don't know.
Very good point. So that's a discussion, I've been continuously having even internally. So we have 43 billion of our loan book, which is in non-performing right now, and we have 70 billion of customers who are under moratorium, who are not paying interest or capital right now. So that whether 5% of them find it difficult to sustain their business, or 10% of them, or 15% or 20, has a significant impact on the on our situation going forward. But of course there is a shift because of the macroeconomic position we are in, Rohanta. It's fair to say that the country needs to move to a completely different business paradigm. So we need to be looking at assembly, we need to look at manufacturing, we need to look at growing own business, growing Sri Lankan business, exports, knowledge. These are the key areas of focus. So gone are the days we are going to be supporting the importers, supporting the importers and traders with very little value addition. So there is a lot of opportunity for some of the companies who are really adapting in that area and driving. So I know a particular case in Moratuwa, where one of the customers who used to import shoes and sell is now setting up his little assembly plant, and it's been very promising. If you look at the shoe industry or the footwear industry, 80% was imported stuff. Even the DSIs and the BATAs only contribute something like 15 to 17% of the overall consumption. But now we have an opportunity really to be able to import only the raw materials and then start assembling and selling. Same with the vehicle industry. So that's where the opportunities are. So I am quietly optimistic that all these customers, if they really have the will and the energy, can bounce back, and get up to speed. We have beautiful nature. We have an excellent tourism industry waiting to sustain itself and grow. We have been, as a country, very resilient overall by global standards, even on the COVID management perspective. I mean, if you look at the number of people per population, that the mortality rates, we are probably lowest in the world, one of the top 5 in the world. So most of our people are symptomatic, again, because of the management that has taken place in terms of how we address these issues early. So, when the turnaround takes place, we could be a huge net beneficiary. And overall, focus on agriculture, herbal, spa tourism, medical tourism, all that can benefit, along with educational tourism, all that can come together, and also the long haul tourism, just talking about the tourism industry alone. So it is tough times, but I think it's a good time to make the paradigm change for the country as well. Relook at what our priorities are and drive towards our strengths, and then we can actually benefit.
Dilshan, I mean, I think your point you mentioned about how you have the shoe industry where 80% of it is imported, and now you have but then the question is that, I mean, I sit on the board of, I think, one of the largest footwear companies, and one of the problems we have is that the government policy is not consistent. So are you going to bring your height from Australia? Are you going to bring it from India? Are you going to bring it from South Africa? I mean, these are the 3 options which are there. But then the question is that, do I expand my business because I know that there is an opportunity because you're not importing? But would this change? I mean, once you have invested in the company and then you have made it to expand to, let's say, 80% of the market, or let's say 40% of the market, because that organization is almost a 20% shareholder of the market. But then the question is that if you invest, would the policy change? So aren't you all, whilst you are handling the SME sector and consultancy in terms of making a COVID organization look at the opportunity, are you also doing consultation with the government on policy?
Yeah, so this is something that what you just said is something that we hear a lot from the business and the industrialists. So this is something from an advocacy point of view. We are engaging with the central bank as well as the government, the ministries, in terms of making that same point that you did, in terms of whatever the policy, there needs to be very clear clarity and an implementation framework supporting that. Policy cannot be perfect. We don't know only whether it's right or wrong. Will only be known in 2 years, 3 years time. But whatever you decide, make sure you're following it through fully with all the feedback that you've taken from the respective industrialists, entrepreneurs, to make sure that you're really backing it to the hilt. I think that message is very important, and that's a decision that, in the interest of the entire financial services sector, is going to be a critical factor. Even a simple example, there are so many opportunities, as you read in my profile. Just a completely different point, I am a keen cyclist. Now I see the opportunity for cycling in a country like ours like never before. So why don't you really encourage staff to work, to cycle to work? Because at the end of the day, from Boratua to Battaramulla is just 20 kilometers. Boratua, Colombo, Battaramulla accounts for something like 60% of the employees in this country, right? So you build the right kind of framework without the need for investing billions of dollars on monorail systems or expensive transportation solutions. Build the right kind of infrastructure, make it a pride to be able to cycle to work, and then pack it to the hilt in terms of the infrastructure, safety in the roads, and that in itself can be a huge industry, which in turn will benefit in terms of the need to import less expensive vehicles, which is a huge strain on our balance of payments. So my point is exactly what you're saying, Rohanta. Identify maybe the top 5 or top 10 priority areas, back it to the hill, think it through the entire supply chain, think it through in terms of all the different factors that you need to follow it through with, get all the stakeholders aligned, and make sure you convince them and tell them, look, do this, we will support you, and this is not going to be something that we are going to change our mind on. So that reality needs to come through. So I know what you're saying. Even in the transportation industry, you find some of the vehicle importers thinking, look, this ban on vehicle imports is only going to last for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Thereafter, they are going to open it out. So that mindset, if there is no clarity, and if you're not going to give that clear direction to say, look, we just simply cannot afford to allow the type of vehicle imports that we did in the past, and we are going to really focus on the local assembly of vehicles, minimize the importation of luxury vehicles, encourage the importation of this kind of vehicles, which may be the two-wheelers, non-engine related vehicles. Give that clarity, then I think the industry will adapt to that and make the necessary investments for the future.
Dilshan, what is the exposure of HNB to tourism and leisure?
About 7%.
Okay.
From the total
so, I'm just looking at the latest. Okay. So I was just looking at the latest Nielsen Business Confidence Index, and they're saying that one of the key issues almost 92% of the people talk about is the impact of the coronavirus.
Mm.
So I'm just saying is that I know what you said is that your fatality rate is 0.45%, which is much better than the rest of the world. And it's part of South Asia also. But then I mean, do you feel that uh, you know is it right to expose 96% of the economy for the revival of just the 4% of the economy?
Sorry, I didn't follow that point. I said the mortality rate was about. Is that what you're talking about? Sorry, Rohanta.
Yeah. So let me be clear, Dilshan. See, if you look at the tourism industry, is only just 4% of GDP, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now the question is that, I mean, if you take, I mean, it's like $4 billion, and out of that 4 billion, also like you have about 600,000 people who tend to visit always overseas. So now that they are not visiting, which happens to be actually a saving of currency of almost a 2.7 billion. That is what the numbers say. So your net loss is about a 1.3 billion from tourism. Now the question is that what is your view, not the HNB view, this is your personal view of where you're exposing 96% of the economy just for the revival of 4% of the economy, but actually it's not actually 4%, it's almost like 2%. Isn't it better to follow the global diktat of saying, I'm not going to open to tourism, but I'm going to look after the 96% of the economy? I mean, what is your thought on this?
My thought
I mean, do I
is,
make sense?
well, I'll give you my thought there. Basically, I think the value of tourism in this country is underestimated. Significantly underestimated. At the end of the day, we talk about 2 million tourists coming in, which is probably 10% of the population. But in my personal view, you ask me my personal view, that 10% of the population probably accounts for something like, you said 4%. I would actually venture out to say it could be even as much as 20% of the GDP, because the impacts of what they do on the food and beverages industry, on all the industries, footwear, uh, entertainment, clothing, and the direct and indirect impacts in terms of the formal sector and the informal sector. So you go to Nigambo, you find a tourist who will stay, a backpacker who will stay for $10 a night, and then you will also find a tourist who is staying for $300 a night. So I don't think it's as simple as to say that it's only 4%. The official statistics might show it as 4%, but I would venture out to say it could be as much as 20%. So tourism really, has an impact on all the sectors of the economy, and it's one of those understated influences that we take for granted quite a bit. And along with tourism also comes in, with that comes a lot of confidence to also bring in the foreign direct investment, potential for infrastructure development. All that has a knock-on impact. And at the end of the day, we are an island. So, I mean, it has to be second nature for us to really encourage being we are one of the most picturesque, beautiful countries which have the capacity to show culture, wildlife, the sun and the beaches, all that. I think this is an area that has massive potential. And I don't look at tourism narrowly from the perspective of just the people who come here for a week or two, enjoy one of the experiences and go. But I really look at tourism from a broader perspective. Health, education, all these areas can actually potentially be sectors that can develop through very well thought out, focused strategies.
So how do you see the next 2 months to 3 months? Because today we got to know that the most viral of the strands has been discovered. And we were just picking up with a V-shaped Dilshan when suddenly we hit with the second wave, which has costed us almost 40,000 people getting it and about 200 people dying. So, which is the second wave costed. So, how do you kind of see the next 2 months panning, given that you have also exposed, you open the borders also? I mean, you know what I'm saying, yeah?
So I personally feel that this is a situation that has to be managed extremely carefully, very fluid situation. So almost on a daily basis, you need to monitor the situation and take whatever preventative actions you can to prevent communal transmission. But having said that, there is definitely an opportunity for long haul tourism to recommence in the country. If we don't do that, then it makes it more difficult for a lot of industries that are impacted directly and indirectly from tourism, will face the consequence. So today, if you look at the leasing portfolio of the bank, many of the people are actually transport providers engaged and linked to the tourism industry. So there are so many unrelated industries which you don't directly look at that are impacted by this. But again, it has to be done very carefully in a systematic manner. There are case studies of countries that are doing it very well, but this is really about living in the new normal. So we have to, there will be a situation where you'll have to start, but at the same time, you may have to take a few risks, calculated risks, in terms of how we manage this.
Lovely talking to Dilshan. I think Kaushali has got one question, which I think, because as you know, a lot of people are watching on Facebook and other forms of platforms. Kaushali, over to you. I mean, it was beautiful chatting with you, Dilshan, and a fantastic leadership you have given during COVID-19. And we saw a new set of leaders emerging during COVID-19 because the traditional management style didn't work. There had to be new ways of doing things, very bold, very entrepreneurial, limited data, and you have to take decisions. So I mean, it's great. I mean, lovely seeing you too.
Thank
Kaushali,
God.
over to you.
Learning every day.
Yep, yep.
Yes.
Kaushali?
Indeed. Yes, I'm here, doctor. So there are so many questions coming to you, Mr. Dilshan, especially towards your approach. So let me put that in one question. I believe I do the justice for everyone. So out of the situations that you faced recently, what was the most challenging situation for you personally, and what drove you to face it?
I think the most challenging incident that we faced was handling the situation where one of our staff members 4 or 5 months back was identified in the head office branch as being COVID positive. So suddenly there was a sense of panic that set in, and so the easy thing to do would have been to get caught up in the panic and shut all doors and played it very safe. But we didn't do that. We continued to open the head office. We probably spent one day sanitizing the entire building and taking all the necessary precautions. But we gave a lot of people the confidence to say, look, the bank is safe. You can report to work. We have taken all the precautions behind the scenes to manage it. So I remember on that day when the PHIs came in, and that was the first time that I had also experienced the PHIs firsthand. They come in white, and they have all their medals and all that on their shirts, and about 4 of them come at the same time, and they actually interrogate you. They ask who is the person, who are the people sitting around them, who are the people in the next layer, how many people share the toilet. So they ask you so many questions, and they record everything almost like a police statement. And it creates so much fear that during that time, for the first time, I saw that when the tea was made by the tea maker and brought to the room, nobody drank tea. uh, because on one side they were so excited by what had taken place, and also they were worried that the fact that this tea maker would have, I realized later, would have made tea for the staff, that he could be a carrier of this COVID-19 virus. So that was a level of paranoia that was there. So I believe in this old adage to say that you need to manage yourself. In Sinhala they say tama hisa tama ata tama hisatama sevenalla, which means that God helps those who help themselves. So I drive a very, very strong message across the bank about building your own resistance, building your stamina, developing healthy habits, and that is the only way in which you can build the immunity for your system to be able to manage the risks associated with COVID. And the reality so far, and I'm very encouraged by that, is that 95-97% of the people who get COVID today, recover on their own. So the important thing is to prevent transmission. The important thing is not to, make the vulnerable groups, the elderly, people with existing conditions, catch it. But 95-98% of the people recover on their own. Only 2%-3% of the people who get this are hospitalized or quarantined. So that is a big strength. But as Rohan has just mentioned, there is this new virus that has been found. I hope all precautions have been taken to minimize the amount of community transmission, and we nip that in the bud. But I believe that ultimately the key lesson is about discipline. It's ultimately about having the right discipline, being motivated, being passionate about doing something is fine, it's very important. But at the end of the day, you need to build the rigor, you need to build the drumbeat, you need to have the regular meetings, the regular follow-ups, the regular surveillance, the communications, ultimately in the framework of a good plan, and you need to execute well. So I think that's really what it's all about. Business has to go on. There is no right or wrong answer. You can't shut shop. You have to, take calculated risks and move forward. And that's really what HNB strategy is. And I believe that's really what the country should be doing as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much today for joining with us. Actually, on behalf of the Directorate, let me sincerely thank you for specially sharing your experience, motivating our students, and explaining your passionate approach, especially towards your purpose. Because even at Happy to Entity, Mr. Dilshan, what we do practice is our tagline, our core motto goes as inspire love for learning. So this indeed support that passion, indeed support that purpose. And I'm sure there will be so much of stories other than just the duties that students will take on for the future. And I believe that gives you enormous pleasure to have joined being in the profession of the teacher. So thank you very much for joining with us. And that brings us to an end of another session. While thanking you personally and on behalf of APIT, we are concluding our webinar for the day, and we'll meet you back again in another webinar. And Mr. Dilshan, hope we will have some opportunity to interact with you again when the situations are at ease. So while thanking everyone, and good night from our end.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Dilshan. Take care.
Take care.